Welcome to the Encouragement Conquers All podcast with Justin Fatica, the podcast for people who want to learn how to be the most encouraging person on the planet and enhance their encouragement superpowers. Now, here's your host, Justin.
Welcome, everybody. We're so excited to be here again this week because at the Encouragement Conquers All podcast, we want to inform you. We want to inform you in all walks of life. We want to inform you in your physical, how to grow in fitness. We want to inform you in your financial life, in your family life, and how you can give back to society. If you don't know, we're working on a whole movement in Columbus and Syracuse, New York, to build gyms for kids, workout facilities that kids, your amazing fitness, where they can feel and know and think, I am amazing. I'm a gift. I can make a difference in my life. We want to give back and make a difference. We do that in the spiritual walk as well as mentally, our mental focus. And I can tell you these 6 areas came from Dan Dwyer and Robert Tunmeyer, who have taught me that these 6 areas, we all need to find coaches. And hopefully I and also our guests can be your encouragement coaches to encourage you in those areas in your life. We want to help you to stay encouraged, and we want you to help others to stay encouraged. Right now in our country and in the world, people need to know that they matter, that their decisions matter, that their family matters, that who they are is important. And we have coaches, we have business leaders, we have educators, we have people in the world of faith that share how do they stay encouraged and how do they encourage others. And we have an unbelievable guest. I don't know if you've watched all of our podcasts, but you can subscribe on YouTube. Go and you can rewatch. We have some of my athletes who are actually unbelievable because some of them have come from the inner city and they have totally transformed their lives and they are doing unbelievable things. One of the athletes now, he got F's and D's and struggled in school. Now he's getting all A's. And they're also NBA trainers, and this gift, this encourager today, we are going to welcome him because he's going to inspire us. And today we have the privilege of hosting a true luminary in the world of leadership and coaching, Bill Ekstrom. And Bill is the CEO and founder of Excel Institute, a renowned organization that has revolutionized coaching and leadership across industries. With a career spanning sales leadership, and executive leadership in both private and publicly traded companies, Bill has left an indelible mark on coaching and leadership, on the coaching and leadership profession. In 2008, he founded Excel Institute to address a critical gap in leadership and development. And since then, his work has extended in the realms of athletics, education, culminating in the launch of Excel Sports, which everybody knows me. Gotta love sports. As a basketball coach and somebody that inspires many teams myself, I can tell you that the Excel education has launched in 2020. Bill is also a 2-time TEDx speaker, which many of his podcasts, he goes on many podcasts through being a TEDx speaker, captivating audience with his insight that have reached millions worldwide. His co-authored book, The Coaching Effect, check that book out. The Coaching Effect has been a bestseller since the release in 2019. And his contributions have been featured in Forbes Inc. and other esteemed publications. Today, we are going to delve into Bill's profound journey and his expertise on leadership, coaching, and making a meaningful impact. I can't wait to hang out with Bill. Bill and I are getting to know each other today, and it's going to be fun. I promise you. Bill, great to have you on. I got everything for you, Bill, because I want our audience to know what a gift you are.
Wow, that was that's quite an introduction, and it's very humbling, Justin. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so tell me all about your journey. How have you gotten to the point where, like, I know you've been a TEDx speaker twice, and how did you get there? Like, what was your journey where people really found out, wow, what he has to share is important?
boy, how far back can we go? I find it, and this is kind of part and parcel to that question, but I'm going to stray just a little bit, and I like to perhaps sometimes answer in anecdotes or stories. But I get a kick out of when I'm introduced, like you did, so graciously and warmly and authentically, and it's so humbling. But here's what I find: in my mind goes there anytime I'm introduced, whether it's a speaking engagement or a podcast guest, if I'm lucky enough to be on a podcast, whatever it may be. It makes me pause, Justin, and think, why do they introduce in this way? And here's what I mean by that. Because I think it would be fascinating sometime if someone said, hey, I'd like to introduce our next guest, Bill Ekstrom. And by the way, Bill, as a child, was really a disciplinary problem. He was kicked out of school in the 7th grade, tried to expel him from the school district. He only graduated high school because a couple of athletic coaches cared enough about him to help him mature through there. By today's standards, he'd be considered behaviorally disordered, flunked out of college his freshman year.
I love that.
Almost bankrupt his own business.
I love that because that's how I introduce myself at the speaking events I do. That's how I introduce myself.
So, yeah, but it's interesting because it's those, as you can then relate, Justin, it's those items. It is those setbacks. It is those challenges in our life that encompass who we are today. So to answer your question about the TED Talks, the first one came about, I've never been afraid of trying something. How about that? That's one of my traits is I, to a fault, start something, get it going, pass it off, move on to the next thing. But the first TED Talk I ever listened to, I was fascinated. And it was one of those where, okay, we've got something that I think is worthy of sharing with the world. And my first TED Talk was entitled "Why Comfort Will Ruin Your Life."
Wow,
and it's
love it.
about our science and research on coaching and the impact coaches have on the performance of teams. And one of the big things we found was there is a discomfort component to great coaches that so many people overlook. They think they got to be a buddy and they can't. No, there's a lot of things that comprise great coaching, but the thing that surprised us most is this aura of a healthy discomfort that they had. So we then created a model of how to explain it, and we call it the growth rings. That was introduced in my first TED Talk, and it took off. My goal.
So what is the growth rings? You said.
Yeah.
So what is that?
The growth rings are a model that where it explains environments and environments' impact on our growth. And so the 4 primary environments in which we live we can be in stagnation, we can be in chaos, we can be in order, or we can be in what's called a complex environment or complexity. And each of those 4 primary environments either promote or hinder growth. And it applies biologically, it applies physiologically, it applies psychologically. And so that was introduced in my first TED Talk. And it's kind of interesting. The curator of TEDx Reno, Nevada, which is where I was accepted to give this talk, the goal was to get 15,000 views. And TED measures success by the number of views it gets. And the objective was to get 15,000 views in the first year. And we surpassed that in 30 hours.
Wow.
And the talk had like 5 million.
Why do you think that was? What were people excited about hearing? Because I want our audience to, because you're probably keen on something that maybe they're not.
I think I think I was the first one to really come forward with that, and since my talk, there's been a lot of talks and people that really address and are leaning into the growth only occurs in a state of discomfort component. And I think my talk really kind of introduced that concept. And then not only did we introduce the concept, but we put a scientific model to it that people can understand. And so it took off in business. It took off in the world of sports. We weren't working in the world of sports up to that point.
Oh, wow.
But so many athletic coaches really used it to help themselves as well as their athletes understand, here's why we get pushed every day. Here's why we need to get out of our order, our comfort zone. Here's, so on and so forth. It was a way to explain to them and help them understand that need.
It's like what my dad says. My dad says, Bill, he says, if it's not tough and it doesn't hurt, it doesn't count. You know what I mean? Is it something like that? That's what he taught me. He says, look, our name in Italiano, it means fatica. Like you work hard until you're fatigued. Like you push yourself so much. And that's like lives and breathes within me. So what kind of coaches like really adapted this model? Is there anybody in particular that you're saying like this model worked for them and why it worked?
Well, I think it's not so much. Well, let me rephrase that. You're making me think here, Justin. A lot of programs. I mean, I was reached out to, I don't know, by so many coaches or athletes or athletic directors, and the model is adapted by everything from like tennis clinics in South Florida to collegiate gymnastics programs, or just a lot of people you have used, I think, the talk primarily to help their athletes intellectually understand how it works. And as you know,
like
there's
when they're being pushed, Bill, if I don't mind, sorry, jumping. So when they're being pushed, the why it works so that the kid can understand. We're not trying to beat up on you here. We're not striving to hurt you or anything. We're striving to get you to understand, to push yourself. Is that more the thought process?
Yeah, it is. And you said it best. It's the why. Sometimes I use the term the intellectual understanding. There has to be emotional readiness and intellectual understanding to really move forward. Okay.
Interesting.
And sometimes we get emotionally ready, but we don't intellectually understand. Other times we intellectually understand, but we're not emotionally ready. So this fills the model, the growth rings really fills that intellectual understanding component. So, but so right in line with that though, Justin, I think it's important to understand, while we're huge proponents of challenging people in a healthy way. And I say healthy way because fear can be a motivator. It's just not a healthy motivator. For sure. Because it just, people eventually will fear can lead to chaos, and we don't grow in a state of chaos. But what our research shows is that while challenge, this complex environment has to be in place for people to grow, if you create that for people, and let's say you're a coach, and let's apply it. So I'm a coach. If the first thing I do is begin to challenge my people without first creating a trust connection and a psychologically safe environment, then people view you as more of a jerk than a high-performing coach.
Yeah, it's why, like, when I first start any team, you always go, like, why are you here? And the kid will go, hey, I'm here because I want to play in the NBA. He's 10 years older. And he goes, oh, I'm here because I'm here because I want to play college basketball. Or I'm here because my friends are here. And then I'll go, and I always say the same, I'm here because I believe in you guys. And I care about you guys. And I love you guys. And my hope is that you can care about each other as much as hopefully myself and the other coaches care about you, because you got to build that safe environment. And then they have to see, like you said, once they're like, okay, is this real or not? then they're going to have to,
Yeah.
after time, can I trust that what he's saying is true? And then you could start challenging him. Is that kind of the process?
Yeah, it is. And it's whether, we're lucky enough now we work in business, so we quantify the impact leaders have on the performance of their teams. We work in the world of sports, so we can quantify a coach's impact on the experience of student athletes. And we work in education, and we can quantify the impact teachers have on the experience of kids in a classroom. And we looked at some interesting data here recently, which we were looking at a school district in inner city kids, 14 schools or 16 schools, where the average GPA of just a student in this district is 2.45, I think, is the average GPA. Athletes, if they participate in athletics in this school district, their average GPA is 2.85. So it's a significant. So basically, sports matter, right? Participation in sports matters. But we took it to the next step. We thought, and we looked at, okay, what about coaches that create a strong, trusting connection with their athletes? And we can quantify that. So coaches who score in the 80th percentile or greater in their ability to create trusting connections, their athletes averaged a 3.06 GPA, and they missed 2 fewer days of school than the other athletes. If a coach scores below the 40th percentile, the average GPA of their athletes drops below the school average.
Wow. That's
right.
Unbelievable data.
That's how much connections and creating psychologically safe environments matters to kids.
Well, that's interesting. That's so interesting. Like in our process, like when a kid's trying out for our team, I ask him how the grades are. If the parents say, "Oh, that he's struggling," go look. He's got to come to practice, but we have a tutor to provide because we want him to be able to be great on the court, but we want him to be great in life and in school. And I don't do that just authentically. I don't do that just for school because I probably got worse grades than they did and I survived because it's not about the grades, right? It's about, I believe in the who. So like for us, the first principle that I follow in coaching, I have 8 principles I follow. The first principle I follow is encourage the who is number 1, and it's primary. You have to care about who that kid is as a son, right? As a friend, as a teammate, as a brother, right? Care about that more than you care about school or you care about basketball. And when they if you throw that in there, it's unbelievable. I don't have the data. You'd probably be able to help me get it. But it's unreal the freedom they have on the court and listening as a player. And when I ask them to do 50 sprints instead of 10 like everybody else does, they're like, all right, we're going to do it. And then I take it another level, Bill. I ask them, who are you going to run this sprint for? It's unreal the power. They go, my dad in jail. And they run. I've never seen anything like it. They run so fast. It's ridiculous. So this actually is helpful for me as a coach and a leader.
Yeah, it's the relationship component. What's interesting is these used to be what people would call soft skills, right? Well, your ability to connect, your ability to create a relationship, those are soft skills. They're not anymore because we've learned how to quantify them. And the 3 most, we quantify 6 different coaching themes. The 3 most powerful, the 3 with the strongest correlations to either experience or discretionary effort are challenge, connection, so trust-based connections, and creating psychologically safe environments.
So explain that. This is the third one for somebody who's not, in the psychology world. Not all of our guests would be. Right. Share what that third one is.
Well, to create a psychologically safe environment to where, and sometimes people think about this the wrong way. They think in terms of, wow, am I abusing them psychologically? No. That's not what we're saying. To create a psychologically safe environment is an athlete feels like they can be, or student, or anybody on a team at work feels like they can be their authentic self without repercussions. I feel included. I feel my opinion counts. I feel, now let's put it in an athletic sense, I feel safe taking that last shot of the game. I want the ball. I feel safe asking for the ball. I'm going to take a full swing at the net if I'm a volleyball player, whatever that may be. I feel like the coach and my teammates have created an environment that allows me the freedom to do those things, to be that kind of person. So that's
Great.
When we research.
What if you don't want them to take the shot? What if they're like, that's not your shot? Is it also, you got to feel safe that it's okay to say, that's not my role, I'm a rebounder?
Right. And, that's such a good example. I remember visiting with an athlete, a female athlete, she was a captain of a team, but she wasn't a starter on a basketball team. She wasn't a starter. She was more kind of a specialty player. She would come in off the bench. But if you would have asked her, hey, we want you in to take the last shot, she would have said, no, that's not my role. Because she understood her role within the team. She goes, I know what I do and I know what I do well. But she knows that because we've created, the coach created an environment that allows her to speak freely, to understand her strengths, and to know her spot. So that's all part of really, it's how all these are inextricably linked. And the coaches are going to know that, and athletes got to know that if they don't get to know them personally, right? If they don't crawl into their own lives and really become, to really know that person's motivators, what makes them tick, when do they need a hug, when do they need a kick in the rear end? And most of the time they can't tell me when that is, so I have to know them well enough to know when they need a kick in the rear or to know when they need a hug.
Yeah.
That's what coaching is.
So I'm in the philosophy, faith world, as well as the sports arena and education arena with a master's degree and a degree in philosophy. And Plato, Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas, in that order, right? Thomas Aquinas is unbelievable because what he said is that you need will and you need intellect. And this is basically what you're saying. I mean, you need emotions and you need intellect, which are on the same planets, right?
Right.
But then will, what you're saying, you can't get to will and habit, right? Until the emotions and the intellect can truly understand what you as that person desires, because desires are good, emotions are good, intellect is good, but they can be dangerous without good habits, without understanding what the will is. And it's so interesting. You're bringing up so many things that philosophically have been studied for centuries, but yet you're taking them and using them. And you're like a philosopher, Bill, with the scientific evidence. Bill, the philosopher. I love this guy.
Yeah, thank you for that. But it is fun, and you're right. I had got to work with an amazing, wonderful friend who's a sports psychologist up in Canada, and Dr. Peter Jensen is the name. He works only with Olympic athletes. Dr. Jensen has imparted so much wisdom. I've been so lucky to have been around him enough to hear from him and learn from him. But he talks about what he calls the third factor in coaching, which is getting the person to own and realize those things that we're describing, right? That it's funny, if I and you've probably done something similar. If I'm in a group or if I have an audience, one of the questions inevitably I will ask is, how many of you see in your role, either as a leader or as a coach, to remove obstacles so your people can perform? Most every hand goes up. And my response is always the same. That's not your role. Your role is to help them understand how to remove those obstacles themselves. We are not obstacle removers. We are people that empower others to do it and don't do it for them. That's our job as coaching too, is to help them understand what you just said, right? I have to intellectually understand. That's not my job to do it for you. I'll provide resources. It's your job to learn. It is your job to learn how to motivate. I can help, I can assist, I can tell you what can assist on that motivation journey, the emotional aspect. And then what are the disciplines, the will, right? The things that you talk about that I need to create. I don't have to do those for you. We can do them together, but you have to execute it. So it's giving them all those tools so they can develop all those things themselves.
Yeah.
And we create amazing citizens and human beings.
And that's what gets us, all of this, what you're giving us, Bill, keeps us encouraged. This podcast is encouragement conquers all. I believe that. Like, that's why I'm doing this podcast. Like, right. I believe that you can have a discipline, not the feeling of encouragement, not the intellect of the encouragement, but the discipline of encouragement. It takes courage. What I do is it takes courage to I go practices where I put obstacles in your way so that the game will be easier. I go, is practice harder or is the game harder? And all the kids go, practice,
Yeah. And funny, we actually measure that. We ask student athletes across the country, about one of the questions is, my coach creates practices that are more challenging than games. And they have to respond to that. So you're right. That's a very important thing. And I'm glad to hear that you do that.
What's your data on that we should, and I look at this with kids. Like, I'll use an example. My son, right? He's on the team and I don't give him a cell phone. He goes, all his bike. Now, at the time, he's 16 years old. So every kid's got a cell phone but him, right? And all the players are like, coach, you could pay for that. That's horrible what you're doing to your kid. And I go, no, you're right. I could pay for it. But it's a dangerous thing, and it can be a gift if you use it wisely. And if he wants to jump into that world, he has to pay for it himself. And if he's ready for it, he'll pay for it himself. And my son never argued with that. He understood that. Because he was saying, I needed more practice without the phone, to be able to get ready. And I guess, is there any data that you could help us? Like, I'm interested, what's the data with people that create harder practices and you create that environment, or you create that people, like, one of our ways to design your life is how are you going to design your family life? So we need to create tougher. Everybody's creating easier experiences for their kids. I don't think that works, Bill.
It doesn't. It's really, it's funny when you're sharing that story about your son. I've always said it is so much harder, so much more challenging as a parent when your kid asks for $20 to tell them, help them understand a way they can go earn $20 versus just giving them a $20 bill. It's so much easier to give them the $20 bill. It's so much more helpful and beneficial to help them understand how they can and what they can do to go earn $20. So yes, without probably getting too specific, our science is infinitely clear on experience improves when challenge is in place. Now keep in mind, other things have to be in place too. It's not just a standalone. These things are inextricably linked. We talked about how the relationship has to be strong. But when that's strong, if you do not challenge kids appropriately, the experience drops, which means effort drops. Things they're not going to maximize. And so
I think it's like that in marriage, Bill. It's like that in marriage. When my wife makes it tougher, I'm so more excited about her when I'm really tight with her, if you know what I mean, Bill. I mean, seriously, it's like, holy cow. It's like, man, I worked for this. I gave it everything I got. I think everything in life, it works like that. It's not like we're not supposed to there shouldn't be like a control in that, but there should be a purpose mindedness that you don't just get to get. It's like when my kid, like my son, we missed last night we had a big game. We lose by 2 and we lost. I set up the game. We shouldn't have been in it. I mean, they had triple the talent. They didn't even think the other team was like, we're going to blow them out. Just that we were in it where it was miraculous. And what happened was I took them for ice cream because we lost. I'm not taking for. If you win, you already got your reward. I like that you handled losing with a greater dignity. How about losing? How does losing help people?
Well, hopefully losing creates discomfort. And if it doesn't, we probably isn't the appropriate person to have on one of our teams anyway. I'm trying to think. I think it was Aerosmith had a song or a line in Dream On, which is you have to lose to know how to win.
Yep.
But I do believe there is a lot of merit to that. And then people have to learn how to win as well. And so there's so much baggage around this, right? So when you lose, there's a lot. Is how do I handle it? Have I been taught how to handle losing? How does my coach handle it? How do they make me feel after losing? How do my parents handle it? So there's a lot of things that really, there are a lot of triggers that happen both with winning and losing, but it's what our job, and I think our role as coaches and encouragers, kind of part and parcel of this podcast, is to how do we get them to respond to those triggers? And how do we help kids understand they control that response? They don't always control the trigger. Sometimes triggers are forced on them, right? Maybe it's a trigger, as the coach says, we're running more lines. Maybe it's a trigger that you got fired at work. The pandemic was a trigger. It's really helping them understand how do you respond to it, and how do you because your response dictates your environment, and your environment, as we talked about earlier with the growth rings, dictates your growth. So how can I use a loss to put me in an environment that creates growth, which is discomfort? Whether it's better strategies, better skill, or just trying harder, whatever that may be. Because sometimes, as you just said, Justin, you play a more talented team, it doesn't matter sometimes. You can do everything. My buddy, another sports psych, he's got a great word for it. He goes, can you just max out when it matters most? And if you can, whatever happens, happens. So it's about maxing out or achieving your peak performance.
Yeah, I got a question just to move on to a different direction. What's the highest good and encouragement, of course, is in this terms, this podcast for you, Bill? What have you seen that is the greatest good for your life personally and for anybody else that you've been working with? The highest good or the highest character from your perspective? It could be a multiple effect, but if you had to narrow it down, it's like for me, like, what's my mission in life? My mission in life is to use all my energy, everything I have within me, all of my disciplines, all of my resources, to let every person on the planet know they're amazing. Like, that's like my mission in life. So what would be your highest good? And amazing, I mean that they're being all they can be, and they believe that they are good and that what they do matters in their life.
I remember some years ago, and one of my first coaches in business, a business coach, right? And she came to my office, Justin, I'll never forget it. She sat down and she said, "Okay, Bill, what's your why?" And I said, "Well, that's easy. Nothing impacts performance more than coaching." And she said, "No, that's your company's why. What's your why?"
Yeah, I love this.
And and here I am in my, at the time, in my perhaps early 50s, and I was embarrassed and flabbergasted that I could not answer her. I had never sat down and really thought through it. And I've told the story before. She may as well just got up, closed her book, dropped the mic, and walked out, because I have no idea what we talked about for the next hour and 45 minutes, because I couldn't get that question out of my mind.
That's beautiful.
All that is to say, it took me weeks, but eventually I figured out my why is growth. For myself, for everything around me, it is all about growth. And I think my message around that would be, and I always get a kick out of this, whether I'm a coach in the world of sports, whether I'm a coach or leader in the world of business or a teacher in a classroom, you want to have a greater impact on those kids. You want to help them grow. You want to help them achieve performance. You want a better team, whatever that may be. That starts by going home and looking in the mirror, by owning it.
Yeah. So for you, what are the areas that like you like to grow in? Like, because what we believe here is there's 6 areas on the Encouragement Conquers All pod that every person who's listening to this podcast, we should be growing spiritually, we should be growing mentally, we should be growing physically, we should be growing socially, which means by Dan Dwyer, which means giving back. People think socially means going out and have some drinks. Like, okay, that's all right, having a couple of drinks with your friends or whatever, but like what matters most is socially. How are you giving back to community? And then family life. How are you growing in your family life? And then how are you growing in your career and financially? So what are areas or disciplines for you, Bill, that encourage you to grow in your life? You say your mission is growth. What are areas that you're saying, look, I do this every day and this helped me to grow, or I do this every week and it helps me to grow?
Some years ago, Justin, I was in a bad way physically. I had major back problems, and I've lived a life of chronic back pain, from high school basketball. I'll never forget the first time in drills, it's like, what the heck happened? And it kind of stayed with me.
We're shooting guard.
Yeah, I played number 3.
Number 3. Okay, great.
So anyway, and then it just kind of bothered me my whole life. So from my late teens into my early 50s, and got to a point where I couldn't walk more than 100 yards without collapsing in pain. I was being wheeled through airports in buggies and wheelchairs to go different places to work, and I hit that low point, and I was go, bust up, always kind of going. And this long way of answering your question is through a couple different methods, I was made aware that I'm not taking care of myself, not just so much physically, but more mentally. So I thought I need to commit to a mental discipline to evolve and grow my mental self, my mental strength, more than anything else. So I'm going to do that. So I started off, and this started in 2017. So I've been doing it now, literally 5 days a week, every day since 2017. I get up every single morning and I do mindfulness work. I journal every Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. Every morning I journal, and I get everything from my head down on paper.
So what are stuff that you write
brain
down?
download.
So like, what would you write down the past week or whatever? What are some of the type, if you don't mind mentioning, what are some of the types of things you'd write down for journaling? So people know, hey, this is what I do.
Yeah. Which I try and be, when I'm doing that, 2 things. Number 1, I try and be very present. So I will write down everything from, because I have my eyes closed, and I may be in a coffee shop. Like yesterday, I was in a coffee shop. I remember writing down, I hear somebody opening a box behind the counter. Okay. I hear the hum of an appliance. I hear a car driving down the street. So I'm really working on being present. So I am literally doing just, putting that. And then the next thing I focus on while doing it as what are the things that are bothering me? Because if I can take all this noise up here and articulate it and put it in writing, that helps me solve problems in a much healthier fashion. So those are the two primary things I do in journaling. Then I close that document on my computer, and now it's like 200 some pages long. It's just every day for the last 6 years, or 5 days a week. And then I move to gratitudes, Justin.
Okay.
And I write 3 things every single morning. And you think this would be easy, but it's not, especially if you're not trying to repeat yourself. I write 3 things that either make me smile or I'm grateful for. And then I write them, and then I randomly scroll and open up, say, what 4 years ago. And I look at a page of things I had written 4 years ago and things I was grateful for then. And what I found, the transformation, Justin, is magical. I begin to smile. It's like, oh, I remember that. Oh, yeah, that's an emotion.
Yeah.
Oh, the smell of a pine forest in northern Minnesota, right? Those things just, and pretty soon I start my day in a great mood, in a positive outlook every single day. And then later in the morning, my third thing, I go to meditation. I get my day going a little bit, and then I know I have to pause it, and I meditate for 20 minutes. So those are the 3 things I do 5 days a week that have then created the downward effect. Number 1 is I'm way more disciplined to working out than I ever have been, because I'm not focused on working out. I'm focused on everything above the shoulders. Everything above the shoulders impacts what happens below the shoulders.
Yep, for sure.
Right? I have been 6 years without back pain.
Wow.
After 30 years of back pain, now I'm 6 years without back pain. Right?
Wow. And what would you say? What's the reasoning? Because of your mental focus and because of your meditation and your gratefulness, that like some of the doctors that I work with say that when you transform your mind and you renew your heart and your will, that all of a sudden healing happens.
Yes, it's that you just described it. That's how it can work. Now, there can be physical, like I have 3 bulging discs, but so I do have something physiologically wrong. But if you read up on, say, Dr. John Sarno, he would say, yeah, but to create such crippling pain to where you can't walk, no. So most, I believe personally, and after reading up on this, that most chronic pain is mental and not physical.
For sure.
And I learned how to create a more mental freedom, more mental resiliency in my life. And therefore, I healed myself with my mind.
Yeah. So me as being, a practicing Catholic, right? How it works for me is like, I have to say, hey, there are things that I need to get rid of, to say this isn't helpful for me. And I have to get rid of those things, whether it's mistakes I've made or people that I need to forgive, And when you're forgiving and you're grateful and you have freedom in that, oh my goodness, like the healthier. And like people at my age, at 45, like my kids go, Dad, why do you have to be in great shape? They get fried, because are you ever not going to be in great shape? I go, yes, I'll be old and you'll be like feeling bad for me, hopefully a little bit. But I want to stay in tip-top shape because that's my very best self, when I'm physically. But you're right. If you're not, I do that too. And just to encourage you, thanks for the good word here today. Like when you're mentally not strong, you can't be encouraged to work out because you're right. This is all messing with your whole body.
Exactly.
And that just makes sense practically. So for meditation, just share, what do you do for meditation for you personally? What helps you? Do you read? Like for me, I read the Word of God. Like, that's what helps me. But for you, what helps you?
Well, I think, and you bring up a good point, which is I think there are things that are meditative, and then there's meditation.
Yep. So it's more listening,
but different. I do things that are meditative, and I know as goofy as this may sound, if I'm fishing it's very meditative. I lose track of time. Everything is just different, right? When I mow my lawn, and I live on 3 acres.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite thing ever. If you were to say top 3 things that encourage me, it's mowing the lawn. I love mowing the lawn.
Yeah, it's really remarkable how meditative it is. Meditation is when I shut it down. Everything, there's nothing going on. And I do that usually 3 different ways. Number 1, I'll do it to meditative music, which is no words, just music, that's geared towards meditation. I'll do it through guided meditation. So if I need, like you used a good example, like I may need, hey, I know I need to really build upon forgiveness right now. I don't feel like I have a forgiving heart. I will do a guided meditation around forgiveness. And the third is just silence. So I'll put on earmuffs, a noise canceling headset, eyes shut, focus simply on breathing, doing my best to create, to get rid of all thoughts except for breathing. Focus on that. And it's very challenging to do, by the way.
Yeah. No. Oh, yeah. No. I get an hour every day. I say I can't go serve others unless I get an hour every day away from this world to focus on what's going to benefit my family, what's going to benefit others. I'm not going to be beneficial to others unless I get away from me and my terms. I call it a holy hour, like an hour. Like that's why you say it's the top notch, most important thing in your life.
And you just, bringing up what we were talking about earlier. You want to impact others, man. It starts by looking in the mirror.
Yes.
You have to be your best self in order to be able to do that effectively. And we tell people all the time, I want more team performance. My team isn't winning enough. I want greater relationships. Well, great. Go home and look in the mirror.
Oh, I love that, Bill.
You own it all the time.
I love that. And I love your example. It's an example. So I do these, I've done 5 of them. When the family's getting older and they have like a legacy business and they're handing it over to the family, They bring me in to get to a concentrated mission for the whole family that everybody can agree about. So how you do that is they have to have a personal mission and then they have to have the business mission in order to get to the family mission.
Right.
If anyone doesn't have a personal mission, we have to go, okay, we have to do that now. And did you know 9 out of 10 family members I've worked with, they know the business mission. They don't know the personal mission. And we wonder. No, but I like that example. But this is why the encourage the who principle is primary. Like, you got to know who you are. I was in the car with one of my players. His dad, unfortunately, ended his life. He was a close friend of our team, his dad. And he took him to the Denny's and said, basically, this is the last day I'll be on this earth. And he thought he was teaching him a lesson or something. And he comes home and he, overdosed on drugs. And so I spent a lot of time with this kid and really trying to build up his who. And so I said, who, I know what you want to do. You want to make money. You want to have a job. You want to, have a career in something. You might want to go to school or maybe not. But who are you, Carter? And he sat there like this. He couldn't answer.
That's I think one of the more powerful things we can do for anybody is to help them understand their strengths, their weaknesses, and we all have them, right? To understand what is important to you. And just, I remember we have a colleague at work, and she was an All-American volleyball player in college. And she works with our sports division. And during the interviewing process, I remember, which I do with most anybody I hire, I asked her, I said, okay, so dream with me. talk to me, it wasn't the classic, what are your 2-year, 3-year goals? It was a dream with me. What do you really want out of life? And Justin, she couldn't answer it. And I kind of, I let it go, but I could tell she's a really good thinker, deep thinker. And then months later, in another random meeting, she happened to bring up that. And she said, Bill, when you asked me the question, it bothered me that I could not answer it. And I think there's a couple points here. Number one is it made her go think about it, made her eventually get enough quiet time to be able to answer the question. But number two, youth sports, right? She said, all I worried about, Bill, up until now, was what can I do today to be a better volleyball player tomorrow? And then what can I do now to crack this, to crack the starting lineup? What can I do to get a scholarship? Because nobody in her family had ever gone to college. What can I do to be a starter? What can I do to then win a national championship, which she won 2 in college? And she said, all of a sudden that goes away. And nobody's ever asked me those questions. We have an obligation as coaches. Here we are on your podcast, right? The encouragement podcast. You want to encourage people. It's not through telling. Sometimes I would tell you more often it's through asking the questions that you just described, Justin, challenging people. That's where encouragement comes from. It's not from telling. It's really from helping those people self-discover, and they self-discover the best way possible is when it comes to tough questions. So sorry to get off on a tangent.
No,
You're
you're
not
not.
about that.
This is no tangent. This is what this encouragement's all about. Like, what we have to remember, Bill, is this, and this is what I'm all about. My parents taught me through my mom and dad. They always had exchange students at our home every other year. And I said, why do you, Croatia, India, Spain, I'm like, are you like, can't we have a year where we don't have an exchange student? You know what I mean? Like, and they go, yeah, but you need to be out of your comfort zone to know that life's way bigger than you. You need to see people from other climates and other worlds. When I went to try, so I've had a film on my life. I have another film coming out on our basketball team.
Nice.
Hopefully it's gonna do well, impact lives. But I remember being at a film at Tribeca Film Festival, and all these people who didn't believe what I believed, right? They would come up to me crying in my arms, thanking me for being in their life. And they believed nothing of what I believed. And so I went back to what my parents taught me and thought about that and what you're teaching me, Bill, today. Look, we need to start really and you're teaching about sensing, thinking, opening self up to being uncomfortable. We need to keep being uncomfortable and get out of our silos and experience a lot more of life than just what we're accustomed to. And it's so interesting because Dr. Jared Bell, who's at the University of North Carolina, who's a professor in organizational behavior, he asked he asked, I think it was 4,000 of the top CEOs at an average age of 70 who've run major companies, right? And he asked them this poignant question. If you could live your life differently, if you could live your life over differently, what would you do? And these are the kind of things you said, exactly what you just shared about. It wasn't going off. This is the most encouraging thing you can do. He said, I would have managed my money more effectively was one. I would have worked more on the quality of family goals a lot more. I would have spent more time on my own personal development instead of worrying about others. I would have spent more time having more fun in life. I would have planned my career. I would have carved out my life goals and owned my life. Life was not a practice. It was a real thing. I should have taken charge of my life and my goal setting. I wish I would have lived in oneness with God or given back to the community more. And there's a couple more, but my point is this is what you're talking about, Bill.
Yeah. Yes. it's funny, Justin. We've had a couple of exchange students, my wife and I.
That's
And
great.
my wife, I learn from her all the time. She certainly has greater. She knows how to love more wastefully than me. And I say that, with all of the greatest respect, right? She loves way more wastefully than I do. I wish I could love more wastefully like she does. But the global perspective, and I don't mean that like in the sense of business, but you're right. The diversity of bringing people in, the diversity of thought, and it reminds me of, and I wrapped up my first TED Talk with this quote, and see if I can still remember it, but it ties into exactly what you're saying, which is this: the constant facade of order hides the wilderness that is craving to seep out and teach us that life was not created to be what we think it is. Beyond words, we must experience the wilderness to be taught what cannot be otherwise known. And that's what your parents did for you. That's, I think, our role in this encouragement component. I love your podcast. I love how that spirit of it. Let's encourage people to get out of the order, to be a part of the wilderness, to experience wilderness, so they can make more holistic decisions instead of getting told what to do and how to do it. And I love that aspect.
And I think one of the things that brings the wilderness more than anything, which we can connect on, as I know we've got to wrap it up, but I do know that this is, by the way, Bill, thank you for being in my life. Even if I never get, just this moment, it's so special. And that's what I've seen. We have all types of different guests on the show, and that's what I want. I want every kind of genre, because everyone has an integral role in the plan of life to teach you something, to help you learn. And one thing that brings the wilderness out in anything is this term that I believe is the greatest source of encouragement. It's a term you'll be surprised I'm going to say. It's a word that nobody likes, but I believe it's the greatest word for us to meditate on, to think about. It's a word called suffering. Suffering. I never thought about suffering probably my first 20 years of my life. But I've been through my life journeys that people on the podcast, some of them know some of them. And as we continue together, they'll know more. But how has suffering taught you to love, taught you to encourage? Bill, how has it taught you to love your wife and your family even more? Because suffering, none of us want. We don't desire that. But what does it do for us?
Wow. I love having these. I wish we had more time, because these questions.
We'll have you again, Bill. Don't worry.
Suffering is discomfort. It is, and if we really believe that growth only occurs in discomfort, we got to look at the different aspects of discomfort. Suffering is really its way of being uncomfortable. Without you and I we started off this podcast, and you talked about how you opened your talks when you're doing a speaking engagement. Sometimes I gave you example of my background. That's, I was always loved by my parents, but I induced suffering unknowingly, right? I put myself in those spots. It's the suffering that makes us whole. And I know that sounds weird, because until we suffer, we don't know how we respond. We don't know the other parts to us, to our soul, to our being, and how to grow and respond to it. And then more importantly, to help encourage others through it. It's so much of who we are and what we do, and without suffering, we'll be partial selves. We can't ever be whole without it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because there's a great saint. She says, first you must learn to suffer, then you can learn to love. And I always think about that. That's interesting. But that's exactly what you're saying. That's exactly what you're saying, is that like suffering, we don't want it, we don't desire it, but it teaches us so much. And when that happens, we're able to love more grace. I know that because I've suffered, I love more graciously. I think if I didn't suffer, I probably wouldn't be as patient or kind. I can be honest about that.
I think that's well said. Yeah, and suffering has created so many opportunities. But again, I have learned to respond to suffering in a healthy way, and I think that's what we need to help others do. Don't pull away the suffering. Let it happen.
Yeah,
Let it go. Let the pain be there.
That's
but
it.
then, what are you going to do on the other side for them?
And so, in closing, what's the greatest suffering you've been through, and what helped you through it? What was your number one suffering you've been through, and what helped you through it? In closing here,
You know, I don't think there is an event, Justin.
Okay, yeah.
Meaning that, yes, have I lost? Thank goodness I haven't lost children or a spouse or anything like that. You know, usually there's that kind of that emotional traumatic suffering.
Yep.
You know, I lost both my parents, but it's. I think we have to look at and look back at the series of suffering events in our lives. Some more impactful than others. It could be as simple as a loss of a dog, a failing of a test, not making an athletic team. We've used all those examples to, while I got all this fame around TED Talks, nobody really knows that I didn't get, the first ones I applied for, I got rejected. So if we look at suffering as not a moment in time, but a series of moments in time, I think that's really a helpful journey to learn how, because when you look back and say, yeah, I learned and recovered from that. I learned to recover from that. I learned to recover from this. I learned to recover from this. Then it makes suffering more of a holistic journey as opposed to just an event.
And Bill, I can tell you that having you in my life for the short period of time helps me to see that growth, whether through suffering or pain or whether through just the nature of life, that growth has to happen. And it really happens when you're uncomfortable. And
right.
being uncomfortable is so important. And Bill, I hope everybody can, get in touch with you. Any people from our genre and as our podcast continues to grow, we'll have you on again and have you a part of the family, because I want to build such an encouraging family that one day maybe you'll come. We're going to be opening up a gym for kids, and maybe one day you could come check it out. And
there's nothing that would make me smile more than see people at play.
Yeah. and we want people to come in. The whole purpose for the gym is you can learn how amazing you are, that you learn who you are before what you do on that court, that we want primary focus. You're amazing because you're a son, you're a daughter, you're a friend. You have an integral role in being born and created, by a God who loves you and believes in you and has a plan for your life. So thank you, Bill. Honestly, thank you so much for being here today. Anything that you'd like to share with our audience just in closing?
No, just never be afraid of being uncomfortable and then learning from it and growing from it, because that's where it happens. But more than anything, Justin, I just want to thank you for this opportunity and to really have an authentically passionate conversation on these topics. And that's what was fun about this for me.
Oh, well, life is fun when it's meaningful, right?
Always.
It's always much more agonizing when there's no meaning. When you have meaning and purpose, it's a blast. But the days, and you really mean a lot. And I want you to know that authentically this morning, in my time in my hour of thinking and meditating and praying, and I was like, man, I didn't look at it going one day at a time, and you helped me get back to that. And I want to thank you for that. And you're a gift. So thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. You're a treat. You're a blessing. Take care.
All right. You too, Bill. You're the best.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Encouragement Conquers All podcast with Justin Fatica. Make sure to subscribe and follow to be notified when the newest episodes of the podcast go live. You can find contact information and important links in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.